Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and in the last couple of videos, we've talked about writing loops in GameMaker. So if you want some block of code to execute more than once in succession, you can use a loop to accomplish that. So we've talked about spawning a bunch of scarecrows on or around the player using a couple different methods. We talked about the repeat loop, which is the most simple, straightforward way of writing a loop in GameMaker. It will simply repeat a block of code a given number of times. And we've also talked about the while loop, which is the most general purpose, flexible way of writing a loop in GameMaker. It will simply have code continue running in a loop while some condition is true. And when the condition stops being true, you'll break out of the loop. We also talked about the perils that can come along with infinite loops. And today, I think we're going to talk about something that's about halfway in between. We're going to talk about the for loop. So, if you want to write a basic loop which runs a certain number of times with a while loop, it would probably look something like this. We're going to define the max number of iterations, so max scarecrows in this case, we can initialize that to 10. We can define a loop counter as it's known, so the current number of scarecrows, we're going to initialize that to 0, and we're going to run this loop while that loop counter is less than the max iteration count. And when the block of code in the while loop is finished running, we're simply going to increment the iteration counter, and that's going to run 10 times. Then current scarecrows is going to be greater than or equal to max scarecrows, and the loop is going to terminate. So that's a basic finite loop with a while loop. So the for loop is sort of a shorthand of what we've written here, sort of a contracted version of what we've written here. So I'm going to delete part of this. I'm going to get rid of all that for now. I'm going to get rid of this current scarecrows plus for now. And I'm going to write something that looks a little bit more like for open parentheses. And the for loop comes in 3 parts. First, you have the initialization condition. This is code that runs before the loop begins. Second, we're going to have the update condition. This is an expression which is going to resolve true or false, which is going to determine whether or not the loop should keep running. It is basically the condition that the while loop was checking each time it went around in a circle. And lastly, we're going to have a code statement which is going to run at the end of the loop. So whenever the code inside the loop finishes running, this is going to execute, and it may or may not tell the update condition that the loop should terminate. So what that usually looks like is going to be, if I were to rewrite the same thing that we had before, I can say for var current scarecrows equals 0. This is our initialization condition. This is going to happen before the for loop actually starts running. In our update condition, we can say current scarecrows is less than max scarecrows. And this is, again, basically what was within the condition of the while loop. And lastly, we can say current scarecrows plus. And that's our for loop. We don't have to add anything else to the end because our little current scarecrows plus condition is going to run automatically. Oh, I need, let's initialize current scarecrows with an S. This expression here, this statement is going to run automatically when the code inside the loop terminates. And now if I run this, this is going to be identical to what we had before. So we are going to spawn 10 scarecrows around the player when we hit the spacebar. But now instead of writing out a while loop, which had like multiple, like different lines of code which needed to be written, we can kind of all write this out in the same line of code. I feel like calling this particular instance of a for loop like a shorthand of the while loop is a little bit silly because like these variable names are all very long and it's still rather long. But instead of having to write out multiple lines to go with the while loop, you can kind of define all the variables you need in one line like this, and the for loop really is just a pure convenience. It doesn't offer anything new over the while loop, it just makes it slightly more convenient to set up. Because oftentimes, if you have a loop in a computer program, it will look something like this. It is tradition, and not everybody does this, but you will often see people doing it. The loop counter, or the loop index, whatever you want to call it, the current scarecrows variable in this case, most of the time you'll see this just abbreviated to the letter I, and you'll see for var I equals 0, I is less than some condition, I plus. Using the variable named I like this is another shorthand that you will often see in computer programming, just as sort of a terminology that everybody agrees to. I, in this case, can stand for index, it can stand for integer, it can stand for whatever you want it to. The important part is that whenever you see a loop like this, if you see the variable I to go with it, you'll just kind of automatically know that it's the loop counter. This is especially common when iterating over a list or over an array. That is something which I haven't talked about yet in the series, and that may be a story for another day.
Hey.
Now, we're not currently really doing anything with this loop counter with our variable I here, and you definitely can for every time you go through the loop, and that can be useful for a couple different things. Again, if you want to index a list or index an array, that is a good way to do it because you have a built-in loop counter ready to go like this. Something else you can do is, if you wanted to spawn objects in a pattern around a player, and this is a more video gamey example than just like iterating over a list, which you could do in pretty much any computer program. But if you wanted to spawn like a bunch of scarecrows like in a horizontal line, let's say we'll spawn a bunch of scarecrows horizontally at the player's Y coordinate on the vertical axis. Horizontally, we can say the player's X position plus, let's say, 15 times I. And this is going to cause, we're going to spawn 10 scarecrows in a line spaced out 15 pixels starting from the player. And this is going to happen in a regular pattern. And if you think about what this loop is doing line by line, it's pretty easy to see why. So variable I is going to be initialized to 0. So the first scarecrow that you spawn is going to be spawned at position player's X plus 15 times 0. So it's just going to be at the player's X position, and it's going to spawn on top of the player. And after you go through the loop one time, I is going to increase by 1. So now I equals 1. The X position that we spawn the next scarecrow at is going to be 15 times 1. Plus the player's X position. The second scarecrow is going to be X plus 15 times 2. And it's going to spawn these scarecrows nice and neatly in a line starting from the player's position. You can, of course, do the same thing with the y-axis if you'd like. If I run this, try to predict what this is going to do. It's a useful exercise in some respects to see code like this and try to predict what pattern it's going to create. This is going to give us a diagonal line pointing up and to the right. And there's all kinds of other patterns that you can create simply by doing some math with a loop counter in a loop like this if you spawn a bunch of objects or bullets or enemies in a row like this. If you wanted to spawn these scarecrows in a ring, for example, you could use angles and trigonometry to figure out the X and Y position instead of just going in a linear fashion. If you remember parametric equations from high school, what we've basically done here is we've just created a parametric equation to dictate the position of the X and Y position of the scarecrow that we spawn. And it's very easy to do something like that using a loop counter. Now, just because you will usually see for loops structured like this in the wild doesn't mean they always have to be, with the I equals 0 in the starting condition and the I is less than something in the update condition and the I plus plus at the ending condition. You could put whatever you want in all three of these blocks of the for loop. It is debatable how useful that is usually. Maybe instead of saying like I plus plus, you want to say I plus equals like 10 or something like that. Or maybe you want to initialize like I to like 100 or some other value that isn't 0. But usually you will see a for loop formatted like this. There exists some really cursed code out there which does some very unusual things with the for loop, particularly the update condition. If you ever see something that looks super weird like that, just know that the person writing it probably got dropped as a baby, and that doesn't mean that you necessarily should write your code like that too. Lastly, and I really wish this wasn't something I have to bring up, but on the internet you will see people accusing for loops of GameMaker of being slow. That is, by and large, not true. The reasons that people say that are complicated, and most of the time it is a result of people either misunderstanding or misrepresenting what's going on in the rest of their code. I've made a lot of videos on optimizing games in GameMaker over the years, but if you're just starting out, this is something that you probably shouldn't worry about as much as you should worry about, like, learning what all the moving pieces do. So if you see someone going on about loops in GameMaker being slow or something like that, just tell them to see me after class. I'm gonna make them write lines or something. But I think that's all there is for loops. So next time we have one more loop type to discuss, and that is the do until loop. It is definitely the least common version of a loop that you will see in GameMaker or really anywhere. Until then, my name is Michael. I like Wizards and Dragons and making games. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. I like to pitch it as a top-down 2D Zelda, except you're a magic duck who casts magic spells. Steam page can be found down below. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places, and if you felt like pledging, I definitely would appreciate it. I hope you all found this useful, and I'll see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spide-Eye Games, Pixelated Pope, Paradox, Nykotic, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Brenton, Bokeh Dev, and Argo the Knot for supporting these videos. If you want to join the ranks of these very cool people, head on down to the Patreon page in the video description to join the fun.